Candace, I believe you also were going to share a story with us today as well.
Hi, yes, I was. So I went to a magnet high school, so we had drama, theater, um, band, dance, and a couple of others. But it was actually a really diverse school, and it was in Miami, Florida. And one of the experiences I will never forget was senior year. We were prepping our monologues and such for college auditions, and I don't know what monologue it was that I had gotten. Um, but another young lady in my class was like, "Oh man, her monologue is so much better than mine." And we had this teacher who would come in and work with us on our monologue prep in senior year. And I will never forget when the young lady commented on the monologue I chose. The instructor points to me and says, "You can do any role that this other young lady who is white presenting that she could do," but then points to her and says, "But you could never do every role that Kandace can do." And to this day, it sticks with me because I think that really shaped how I now teach my students in the arts education programs that we work with, because there are these differences. And I know race is like a bad word that people never want to talk about in the schools. But if we don't start having those conversations early on and ingraining them in our children for when they become adults, that's how you end up with shows where we're having to then argue it out with people on why this isn't your story to tell. You can present the story and that's great, and you can be an ally and all of those things, but knowing when to amplify someone else's voice is so much more important. So that story to this day has stuck with me because I think that that's one way you can teach kids about this industry, number one, and number two, hopefully it translates over to some of these other industries that they go into, because it's a great way to teach them expression, but it also teaches them how to stand up for everybody else.
Exactly. Thank you for that, for sharing your story, Candace, and sharing how that made you feel. Just so curious, how do you think the other students in that class reacted to that, especially those who may have been, like you said, white presenting, or other students that are representing other cultures? How do you think that that was received by them?
I will say this instructor, she is maybe 4'11", she's tiny, and she tells it like it is. And with the group we had, I really felt everyone received that and could acknowledge it because she was talking to a predominantly person of color group. So I also think that that does something for our psyche, being in a program that all of us are going to college auditions, and most of the people who are at these auditions don't look like us. So it was just, yeah, it was something I think everyone kind of took in and was like, "Oh, her name was Ellen." It was like, "Miss Ellen's not playing with us." Okay. And I think everybody understood that as like, "Oh, so my space in this industry is a bit different than maybe so-and-so's."
And so do you think, as you reflect on her response, do you think that she responded positively? Like, talk to me about the power dynamics within that group and if it shifted
Absolutely.
or anything.
I don't think it shifted in a negative way. I think there was this level of respect that we as students had for Miss Ellen, because her being a white woman and knowing that she does have that level of privilege, and especially with dealing with a group of students who are mostly BIPOC students, and her willingness to just be honest and say, "Hey, when you enter the industry, this is not always going to be what you see. You may have to fight for these roles that you want, but you are like, you've earned that space just as much as the next person." And that was, for me, that was something really powerful. I mean, this is the woman who she worked for a school out in Texas, and she was like, "I want you to make sure you go there, and I want you to make sure you audition. And even if you get in, don't feel like you have to go because of me, but I want you to make sure you're there because your talent is there." And that is validating as a student of color in a school that, yeah, we're very diverse. But when you start looking at like the big picture of theater programs across the nation, there's this conversation of accessibility, and you know, BIPOC students deserve a spot just as much as any other. And that's the important thing for me that I took from her, was that you can be an ally in the classroom, and that will resonate 5, 10, 20 years down the line. Here I am, but almost 15 years later, and I'm still thinking about that conversation.
That's awesome. And it sounds like you continue to plant those seeds with your students, which, as the previous individuals that shared their stories, talked about the importance of planting that seed and speaking into the lives of our students and having these dialogues and creating these safe spaces. So
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, you are your students' biggest allies, but you can also be their biggest detriments too.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much again. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. That was so well said, too. That the power that a teacher has in the life of their student cannot be understated.